Hello everybody and welcome to GeoIntel. My name is Cody Jordan. I should have a really good show today. For anybody interested in the Gaza topic, I have spent the last 2 weeks compiling intelligence sources and news stories from both sides of the aisle in regards to the current conflict between the IDF and Hamas and the occupation of Gaza City. And eventually the entirety of the Gaza Strip. So I'm going to give kind of a rundown of everything that has happened in the last 2 weeks. I'm going to go into the peace proposals. I'm going to go into the responses of the failed peace proposals by other countries. I'm going to delve a little bit into the starvation crisis that everybody's been talking about. And I'm going to wrap it up with a bit of my own takes on some of what has been happening with the censorship of journalists and of really anything anti-Israel, and sort of how that ties into the news stories that I'm going to be providing you. For the first probably 3/4 of this, I'm going to mainly be just going through stories. I've got some videos, some footage to show you, some photos as well. And yeah, we'll just refocus my camera real quick and then we'll get right into it. There we go. I'm back. So I currently have 7 pages of notes for this show, so it's going to get pretty dense, and this may be the longest episode I do for the next couple weeks. This may even be a 2-hour episode, but we'll see. It depends on how much I end up interjecting. So I want to start it off. I'm not going to give a huge rundown of the Israel-Gaza conflict. Pretty much everybody has a pretty good understanding of what's going on there, I think. And we know that Israel has been preparing to go into Gaza City and really just to their own degree, although not to the same degree as Hamas, really trying to skirt the peace negotiations. And then I guess I'll just start off with how we know exactly what Israel is thinking in preparation to this. We'll give you a few quotes from their heads of state and things of that nature. So, the Israeli preparation for the invasion of the Gaza Strip. Palestinians are reporting that Israeli tanks, backed by air cover, are moving towards the entrances of Gaza City's Sabra neighborhood in the south. Mariv reports that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will not halt the occupation of Gaza City, codenamed Operation Gideon's Chariot B, therefore making any hostage ceasefire deal unlikely. Quote, the prevailing impression is that the Prime Minister is determined to see the operation through to the end. He realizes that without it, he will not be able to maintain the government's cohesion and it will collapse. And that is while the huge dispute is currently happening in the Knesset amongst the Likud party. I believe at the moment they are either at a 50-50 in the Knesset or they have fully lost their majority, and I'm speaking of the Likud party. And that's been a huge controversy between a lot of the heads of state in Israel, especially some of the more pro-war people within the Israeli government who are criticizing the way that Netanyahu has gone about his invasion of Gaza and a few other things as well. Moving on with the Israeli preparation of the invasion, IDF armed forces have been spotted advancing into Gaza City in preparation for a major assault, and we actually have footage of that. I'm going to give it to you here in just a second. As you can see, there's an Israeli tank right there. And that's just some firing in the distance as the Israeli forces start to move in. And then moving on is Israeli Channel 12's Nitzan Shapiro reports that Hamas is bracing for the IDF's push into Gaza City by coercing civilians and closing off escape routes. Hamas has doubled down on using Israel's efforts to avoid civilian casualties as a tool, deepening its exploitation of the local population. Of course, take that with a grain of salt. That's Israeli Channel 12 stating that, and there's definitely some truth there, but that's also, just be aware that that's Israel stating that, and keep an open mind. According to open source Intel, Israeli tanks up in the Zetwin neighborhood of Gaza City, Israeli tanks are lining up in the Zetwin neighborhood of Gaza City, and they are getting ready. And we also have a video of that, an image of that as well. So you can see here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tanks, plus some other type of military support vehicle, likely carrying some form of cargo. Sorry guys, I'm jumping in and out of my notes and all this stuff. So then Defense Minister Katz, along with the IDF and Shin Bet leaders, have approved a war plan to take Gaza City, evacuation order until October 7th, and then siege and ground offensive could begin. Hostage agreement could call off the operation, however. And then in terms of that hostage agreement that could end the operation, here's the latest that we have on that. Hamas actually accepted the latest Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal proposal. Al-Hadath said the proposal sent to Hamas includes the handover of 10 live and 18 deceased hostages, the admission of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and a 60-day ceasefire. Negotiations on ending the war would begin at the beginning of the ceasefire. Hamas's response aligns with 98% of the Witkoff proposal previously accepted by Israel, according to Axios. The deal includes the suspension of Israeli military operations, Israeli withdrawal to the security belt within the Gaza Strip, 60-day ceasefire, and in return for the release of 10 living and 18 deceased hostages. And I'm sorry, I repeated that part, but I had it listed twice there. Al Arabiya reports that Hamas is demanding binding international guarantees to force an end to the war and prevent Israel from seizing Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister's office on Hamas ceasefire response said, quote, Israel insists on the release of all 50 hostages, end quote. So in other words, they rejected the proposal that Hamas had accepted, and I forget which country propped up that proposal. I believe it was either Qatar, potentially even Lebanon. I don't want to speculate any further though, because I don't remember exactly. But Israel flat out rejected it unless they got all 50 hostages. And quite frankly, we don't even know that there are 50 hostages alive. So it could be the case that Israel is asking for these people who they can't get in the first place, or maybe perhaps they are all alive and Hamas is still using them for bargaining chips. That's just as likely. And then Steve Witkoff, who is the, I know his title, give me just a second. He is the envoy to the Middle East, said that the Trump administration's stance is clear. No partial delays, only the release of all hostages at once. He stressed that Hamas will not be allowed any role in a future government, a position fully aligned with Israel and President Trump. According to him, Hamas is aware of this reality and has started signaling openness to a possible arrangement. He added that the Gaza question will be settled before year's end, but it is Hamas that continues to block an end to the war. And then now I have 7 total. It's 5 videos and 2 photos of readjust my camera here, of the current Israeli aggression that has been happening. You're going to see videos of bombs going off and things of that nature, just to kind of give you an idea of what's been happening there. Oh, and I almost forgot. So just to start it off, this right here, this is a map of all of these strikes that Israel has landed on the Gaza Strip since the reoccupation of the Gaza Strip. And if you know what the Gaza Strip looks like on a map, you will know that everything in red here is the entirety of the Gaza Strip itself. So in other words, they have effectively struck every square inch of ground since they started this reoccupation.
Gaza, or perhaps more accurately, this was North Gaza. After 22 months of intense bombardment from Israel and the war with militant group Hamas, it now resembles the bottom of a fire pit. According to the UN, 92% of homes in Gaza are either destroyed or damaged, and the destruction is so widespread it could take 21 years to rebuild, if the conflict stops. Ceasefire talks have collapsed, and now Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly favouring a complete military takeover of Gaza, starting with widening the current devastating offensive on the destroyed Strip. Tents stretch out towards the horizon, as far as the eye can see. This is the central coastal region of Gaza, which is now housing nearly 500,000 people forced to flee their homes under Israel's bombardment and evacuation orders. The main encampment here is called Al-Mawasi, a so-called humanitarian zone, although it's been repeatedly hit by Israeli aircraft. Gaza was already one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. Today, the UN says Al-Mawasi is now home to more than 47,700 people per square kilometre.
So, in case you were ever wondering to yourself what people meant when they said that Gaza was an open-air prison, that right there, that is what they mean. 92% of the buildings are gone. People are currently, as you see here on this image, living 2 feet from each other in what are effectively 1920s Great Depression shanties with very, very limited resources. And they can't go anywhere. They're completely fenced in, and they are still at the IDF's will.
أيوة. استهداف مباشر الآن كما تشاهدون من جباليا البلد والنزلة. هذا هو المشهد من.
We should have a couple more things here. We also have 2 images. That's another one of another airstrike that happened in Gaza City. And here's another one, which is just insane. That image there is wild. I mean, it almost looks as if they dropped JDAMs, which are effectively very lightweight bunker busters. And they're likely targeting some tunnels, so it absolutely makes sense, but it's all of the destruction that it's causing in the process that obviously becomes the issue. And then I'll get off of my media window here. Surprised I'm still in focus. So, in terms of the escalation of the current conflict, I'm going to delve a little bit into both sides and what they've both partook in since this entire thing began. So, the Palestinians, more than 15 terrorists attacked a fortified post of the 90th Battalion Kafir Brigade near Khan Yunis with gunfire and anti-tank missiles. IDF troops, backed by IAF airstrikes, killed 10 of the attackers in close combat. One soldier was severely wounded, and 2 others sustained light injuries. The IDF has again intercepted a drone smuggling weapons that entered Israel's airspace from the western border. And I'm actually going to show you an image of that. These are the weapons that the IDF collected, and this is not the only shipment. I did not bookmark the other 2 that I saw, but there were 2 other stories just like this where drones were caught trying to smuggle arms to supply Hamas inside of Israel even, and I don't know if this itself was in Israel. Yeah, it entered Israeli airspace from the western border. So yeah, they have been shipping weapons from Gaza via drones into Israeli airspace. Sorry for all the jumping around, guys. I'll refocus that thing. Keep it moving. So, and now in terms of Israel's aggression, since March, the IDF says it has killed over 2,100 Hamas operatives, including senior commanders and leaders, while striking more than 10,000 targets from the air and the sea. The Hamas-run health ministry claims 10,576 Palestinians have been killed without distinguishing between militants and civilians. The IDF reports it now holds operational control over 75% of Gaza, enabling the expanded operations that disrupted Hamas's command structure. The most notable strike came on May 13th when Mohammed Sinwar, Hamas's Gaza leader, along with Rafah Brigade Commander Mohammed Shabana and South Khan Yunis Battalion Commander Mahdi Kara, were killed in a tunnel under the European hospital in Khan Yunis. Other senior Hamas figures, security officials, 6 naval commando leaders, and dozens involved in October 7th were also eliminated. The IDF says these gains pave the way for its next offensive in Gaza. Israeli forces also were seen operating north of Gaza. I should have removed that, though. That was part of one of the earlier things that I had in here. Israeli airstrikes were reported east of Deir al-Balah. The IDF paratroopers brigade has leveled more than 2,000 structures in Khan Yunis over the past 3 months. A senior officer devised a tactic where one drone punches a hole in the roof with a small munition, then another drone drops a heavier charge inside. The approach eliminates the need for ground troops to enter the building and reduces demolition time from an hour to just minutes. And I just laughed there. You'll understand in a second why I laughed. It's kind of a diabolical laugh, but it'll make sense. IDF forces eliminated Mohammed al-Aswad, head of Hamas's general security apparatus in West Gaza. The IDF reported that Givati Brigade forces clashed with a Hamas unit on the outskirts of Jabalia, killing the militants and later locating a stockpile of weapons in the area. And the reason that, again, when I was just speaking of what I had sort of sneered at, I suppose, was the mentioning of their demolition tactics on buildings. And I'll tell you why that's extremely pertinent in just a second and how it ties into the Nasser Hospital incident. But before I do that, I really have to pee, and I peed just before this started, but clearly I didn't get enough out, so I will be back in just a second. Okay, guys. We're back. Just make sure we're in focus here. There we go. Okay. So, back to what I was saying. The Nasser hospital attack. So, there are some very, very disturbing coincidences that I'm about to reveal to you here in terms of how the IDF is demolishing buildings. I will return to that at the very end of this rundown about Nasser Hospital. Kind of give you an idea of how it's all tying in and how really messed up it is, because it is messed up. So, on August 24th, Sharat Hadin, an Israeli law center, is suing Al Jazeera under the Anti-Terrorism Act, accusing it of aiding Hamas and Islamic Jihad through propaganda and recruitment support. The lawsuit could potentially shut down Al Jazeera's United States operations. And if you'll recall, roughly a week or two ago, I think was one or more Al Jazeera journalists that were eliminated by the IDF, and the IDF went on to claim that they were all terrorists. And then here's where this part gets interesting. So like I said, Sharat Hadin, an Israeli law center, is suing Al Jazeera under the Anti-Terrorism Act, accusing it of aiding Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Now, you could think to yourself, well, that's clearly in reference to the Al Jazeera journalists that they killed last week that they have claimed were terrorists. I haven't seen the proof myself. Perhaps there were some ties there. But I find it really funny how them trying to prop up Al Jazeera as terrorists and get them off of U.S. soil, get their news outlet off of U.S. soil, I find it very interesting given this second part. So, a day after that lawsuit, August 25th, Palestinian media report an Israeli airstrike hit the upper floor of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. And we actually have a video of that. I'll show you really quick. It's more of the aftermath than a video of the strike. I apologize. Okay, you get the gist. So, Israel assassinated in that strike British outlet Reuters and Qatari outlet Al Jazeera journalists. An Israeli artillery strike struck Nasser Medical Facility in Khan Yunis, southern strip Gaza, killing 20 people, including at least 3 journalists, medical staff, patients, and rescue workers. One belonged to the Reuters team, while another was part of the Al Jazeera team. Alexander Stubb, president of Finland, said, quote, "It is a failure of humanity that we have not gained control of the situation in Gaza. What Israel is doing violates all humanitarian law." Then the IDF came out with a statement on Monday and said, quote, "Earlier today, IDF troops carried out a strike in the area of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The chief of the general staff instructed us to conduct an initial inquiry as soon as possible. The IDF regrets any harm to uninvolved individuals and does not target journalists as such, even though they did last week. The IDF acts to mitigate harm to uninvolved individuals as much as possible while maintaining the safety of IDF troops." Israel's Prime Minister's office statement said, quote, "Israel deeply regrets the tragic mishap that occurred today at the Nasser Hospital in Gaza." So they're admitting it's a mishap that came straight from the desk of Netanyahu himself. Quote, "Israel values the work of journalists, medical staff, and civilians. The military authorities are conducting a thorough investigation. Our war is with Hamas terrorists. Our just goals are defeating Hamas and bringing our hostages home." A June 22nd incident that I found on Twitter highlighted how Nasser Hospital had been turned into a Hamas-controlled area. Hamas Aero Unit fighters hijacked a bus carrying workers from the American aid group GHF, beat and tortured them, and when the wounded were brought to the hospital, members of Hamas's Saham unit blocked their treatment and incited a mob that lynched them in the courtyard, killing 12. The sister is one of the victims. Osama al-Masahal later accused the Saham unit directly, stressing that her brother had worked for the fund only to provide for his family and corroborated this event. Israel's Channel 12 reports that Khan Yunis Nasser Hospital targeted a man who had been monitoring IDF forces. Footage shows a hidden camera on the 4th floor concealed with a towel and operated by terrorists. Now, I did not write that. That was a news story that I got from, I believe, open source intel, and I'm actually going to show you here a image of the supposed camera that they found on top of the hospital. Do you see it? Yeah, me either. I don't see jack shit. I don't believe that there was a camera there to begin with, but I'll give you more on that in just a second. And refocus, as always. Initial Palestinian reports stated at least 2 of the casualties at Nasser Hospital were part of Hamas. Ismail Boram, the most senior Hamas leader in Gaza, was being treated at Nasser Hospital when he was eliminated. And then also, I'll go back to my media window here because I have an image of a group of Hamas militants outside of Nasser Hospital, just sort of as proof that there was heavy Hamas activity there, but there is across all of Gaza. Gaza is really small. Gaza has 2 million people in it. It's like Manhattan. So Hamas is absolutely everywhere. And then during yesterday's strike on Al-Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, Rafah Police Chief Brigadier General Riyad Al-Qadi, identified as a senior terrorist, was badly wounded. He had been using the hospital as cover along with other militants. So my theory is there were 2 senior leaders of Hamas in that hospital, both of which, if I just read those correctly, were being treated. I am of the opinion that the camera angle to that story was complete bullshit. However, Israel, and we've seen similar stupid ass stunts like this before, just like when they tried to shoot the cross off the top of a church a month ago and they ended up killing every single person in the church. They seem to have these wayward tactics that just end in utter catastrophe when it's all said and done. This being one of them. They were trying to kill 2, maybe 3 members of Hamas in that hospital, and instead of fulfilling some type of special forces operation, they just decided, well, we'll just destroy the whole fucking hospital. Kill everybody inside. Doesn't matter if they're working in the hospital. Civilians do not matter at this point to Israel whatsoever. And I say that just because it has to be said. You can make the argument for the sort of manifest destiny of Israel and the territories that it believes is its own, but at the end of the day, they have to be called out on these atrocities. And to top it all off, they didn't just do one strike that destroyed the building. They did something called a double tap. So they struck the roof of the hospital And then once news crews, once other civilians came to see what was happening, possibly even family members of people that worked at the hospital were being treated at the hospital, they start surrounding the building, and Israel does a double tap. They drop another bomb on the same spot and wipe out every person who was there to see what had just happened. And I say this because, as I said earlier, there was a bit of a correlation here. So I said earlier that this was, let me make sure I have the right part here. This is a quote from the IDF. So the IDF Paratroopers Brigade has leveled more than 2,000 structures in Khan Yunis over the past 3 months. A senior officer devised a tactic where one drone punches a hole in the roof with a small munition. Kind of like the roof of, I don't know, say a hospital. And then another drone drops a heavier charge inside. The approach eliminates the need for ground troops to enter the buildings and reduces demolition time from an hour to just minutes. So it sounds to me like Israel just killed a whole lot of birds with one fucking stone. They demolished a hospital that would inevitably be treating its enemies. They wiped out a bunch of Palestinian civilians, which, at the end of the day, as far as Israel's concerned, is no big deal whatsoever. And they got rid of a few members of Hamas at the exact same time. And they just had absolutely no regard whatsoever for the civilians in doing so. And then there's been plenty of backlash following this, and it's on both sides. So on Hamas, although Hamas has actually had a huge positive thing that has happened, and I'll get to that in just a second. But in terms of the backlash on Hamas in particular here, Gaza's Hamas regime is nearing financial collapse, according to the Gaza News Report. Quote, residents know why. Senior officials are siphoning off funds, including profits from foreign aid, for personal gain, to cover themselves. They threaten or silence anyone who exposes them. The corruption has sparked deep rifts inside the movement, with rival factions accusing each other of disloyalty, while leaders cling to their wealth over the organization or the people. That really seems to be the only backlash at this point in time, at least internally, on Hamas, are from those reporters at the Gaza report. They have seen one huge plus, though. So in terms of starvation, Gaza was being effectively entirely surrounded by the Israeli military forces. They were completely blockaded, and within that blockade, they were holding off all kinds of supplies from going into Gaza. And there is no doubt that they were, without question, starving people in Gaza. However, there was a ton of backlash from the United States and European countries in regards to this. And we even heard Donald Trump speak on this not too long ago, where he, in a meeting, was saying that what was happening was a disgrace. I believe he was in the Oval Office at the time. And following up from that sentiment from the American and European governments, there's been a lot of pressure to change that, and Israel has finally caved. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background here and then get into what exactly happened. So the U.S. and European governments have been applying pressure on Israel to lift its blockade on humanitarian aid to Gaza, which has been in place since March 2nd, 2025. The U.S. has pushed for resuming aid through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, parentheses, GHF, that's the, what am I trying to say? I can't think of what that's called, the abbreviation, there we go, that's the abbreviation, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. A controversial U.S.-backed initiative to distribute food in Gaza, bypassing traditional UN-led mechanisms. On May 18, 2025, Israel announced it would allow limited aid to resume following U.S. pressure, with the GHF starting operations in Rafah by May 27th. The plan has faced criticism for its inadequacy and reliance on private security firms, with chaotic scenes at distribution sites leading to civilian deaths. And we've seen it on both sides. There was a video a month ago of IDF forces literally gunning down people as they were running up to the pallets of food that were being dropped in. I believe they were airdropped. The IDF just started gunning people down. And we were never really given much of an excuse as to why that was. I'm sure it's the same excuse as always. They were going after Hamas. And also, Hamas has been stealing food and threatening people as well in order to sort of maintain their own form of control amongst their population. 7 European nations, including Iceland, Ireland, Luxembourg, Malta, Slovenia, Spain, and Norway, issued a joint statement on May 17, 2025, calling on Israel to immediately reverse its blockade policy, halt military operations, and allow unimpeded humanitarian aid throughout Gaza. According to a recent update from GHF, more than 127 million meals have been distributed since the project began, and 1.4 million meals were distributed yesterday. And then this is a direct quote from GHF. It says, quote, more than 127 meals have now been delivered to the people of Gaza, and every day our operations are reaching more families in need. The Jordanian army announces that it has carried out an airdrop of aid to the Gaza Strip containing 85 tons of aid and food supplies. Jordanian Prime Minister said, quote, reality does not speak of the illusion of a greater Israel, but of an isolated and rejected Israel. The Israeli government then approved a $473 million budget designated for humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. Many Israeli reports have surfaced showing the price of food has dropped significantly in coordination with the overwhelming supply increase. Several Palestinian factions in Gaza, led by the Popular Front, are openly criticizing Hamas for failing both militarily and in governance. They accuse Hamas of excluding them from decisions and blame its hesitation in talks for the collapse of the Witkoff Agreement. Some now threaten to break away and push their own path toward ending the war. And I don't... I know why that was part of the backlash against Hamas. It was part of the starvation part. It should have been higher up. Sorry, that threw me off. And then in terms of the backlash on Israel, August 14th, massive anti-war protests were happening in Tel Aviv. And I have a video of that. Oh, it looks like a couple videos. Or images. Here we go. I mean, as you can see, it's no small protest. There are tens of thousands of people there. There may even be 100,000 people there. And that's nothing small when you're talking about per capita in the state of Israel. There's only 9 million people in Israel, so 100,000 is no small number of people. That's a good portion of your population. All right, guys. And then back to the backlash on Israel. Turkey has intensified its trade ban with Israel due to the Gaza war, expanding restrictions to block Israeli-owned, flagged, or manned vessels from Turkish ports. Turkey prohibits processing of Israeli-linked cargo and barred Turkey-flagged ships from Israeli ports. Al Jazeera reports Belgium's prime minister has begun government talks on the recognition of a Palestinian state, noting conditions like Hamas disarmament and hostage release per Prime Minister Bart de Wever. And while Belgium is jumping on that bandwagon, and you'll see here in a second that France has as well, unless they really push forward on solidifying such an act as legitimizing the state of Palestine, unless they do it like tomorrow, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever. And I don't even, if they did do it tomorrow, I'm not sure that it could make a difference at this point in time. Every UN Security Council member except the U.S. is demanding that Israel immediately and unconditionally remove all restrictions on humanitarian aid. Israeli FM SAR and Netanyahu to shut down the French consulate in Jerusalem after Paris recognized Palestine. And just in case anybody doesn't know, that is no small act there. Shutting down a consulate is huge, because if you know anything about what a consulate is and how it operates, and the people who work within a consulate, they effectively work as midway points between governments, where key negotiators, people within the intelligence communities, come to trade intelligence, to make deals. To shut down a consulate is effectively to shut down diplomatic relations almost entirely. So that is a huge step right there. And then Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, said, quote, "I discussed with the King of Jordan and the Egyptian president the anticipated Israeli attack on Gaza City. Macron's decision to recognize a Palestinian state has sparked a backlash from the Israeli government, galvanizing hardliners and drawing an accusation from Netanyahu that he is stirring up anti-Semitism." And I have a segment on that here in just a second. So, like literally anything that is anti-Israel, anti the Zionist state, even just anti Netanyahu or the Likud party, is immediately drawn up as anti-Semitism. And that will be very pertinent here in just a second. France's Ministry of Affairs has summoned the U.S. ambassador to Paris after the American embassy accused President Macron of, quote, "not fighting anti-Semitism." France calls the U.S. statements as interference in French political affairs, which it is. So it's not only the Israeli government who is calling France anti-Semitic, it's the American government as well. And we should not be surprised, because in modern-day America, under the Trump administration, people get deported, people in some cases go to jail strictly for being anti-Israel, with no terrorist links, no nothing. It has happened many times. It will continue to happen as long as Jewish billionaire donors run the White House, and they will for the next 3 years, because people like Miriam and Sheldon Adelson have funded the Trump campaign to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And then I have a segment here titled Information Crackdown, and the reason it is titled that is because, just like we have seen on American campuses fighting anti-Semitism, there are also other people looking to shut down similar speech. U.S. authorities are set to flag all foreign speakers invited to the August 29th to 31st People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit, placing them under visa lookout status because of concerns over extremist affiliations among several of the lecturers. A visa lookout status is a government watch flag that alerts officials to scrutinize or possibly deny entry to individuals linked to security, crime, or terrorism concerns. So those are American citizens on U.S. soil. Not all U.S. citizens, I'm sure, but U.S. citizens on public soil are going to be monitored for attending a conference for Palestine in Detroit. They are also, and I mean, look, it's not like that's the first time we've seen something like that. Look no further than under the Biden administration. The FBI was literally designating people as terrorists for going to school meetings and protesting their children competing with transgenders. So now that Trump is in office and we're supposed to see all of this turnaround of these types of policies, now he is just wielding that exact same belligerent power to fit his own agenda. And the second part of this said placing them under visa lookout status. So in other words, anybody who is here and is not a citizen, anybody who's here legally on a visa, if they attend this protest, they could basically outright have their visas revoked, and I'm sure we'll see quite a few of them be revoked strictly for attending this protest. And then also, Microsoft has asked for the FBI's help in tracking Palestinian protests, per Bloomberg. So it wasn't enough that Palantir, through individuals not only like Peter Thiel, but also through individuals like Elon Musk and all of the people that are tight with Peter Thiel. I'm talking specifically of the Doge workers, such as Big Balls, and I don't remember the rest of their names because Big Balls is the only one that stands out for obvious reasons. It wasn't bad enough that we had Palantir creating databases and tracking people literally for just being anti-Semitic. Palantir has a 2 million person of interest database that are filled with American citizens who more than likely are nothing more than against the creation of Greater Israel and the installment of the actions discussed in the Clean Break memo. And it really concerns me because we now have, and again, this is happening in Detroit. All of these people that are going to have their visas flagged and be under a government watch list, this is happening in Detroit, in an American city. You now have Donald Trump bringing the National Guard into cities like Chicago, like I don't think it was New York, like Chicago. He mentioned a few other cities. I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but you have him bringing the National Guard in under the guise that they are strictly going to be fighting crime. D.C. as well. He also had troops in D.C. And that's great on the surface. But under a government that is cracking down and surveilling Americans strictly for anti-Zionist rhetoric, what is to happen when the second part of the Israel-Iran conflict breaks out? Is anybody in D.C. or Chicago that starts protesting in support of Palestine strictly because they're against the killing of civilians? Are they then going to be shut down? Is that what part of this is for? I mean, if they're there to keep the order, I'd assume that they're going to shut down protests. All of this anti-Semitism crackdown, I've already seen it be used unfairly against United States citizens, and I can only imagine that it's going to worsen over the remainder of Trump's presidency. So it'll be interesting to see where that leads down the road. And then we read earlier about how France and Belgium had discussed recognizing Palestine as a state. But not every European country has pushed themselves away from Israel, as we'll see right here. Following the resignation of Foreign Minister Casper Waldkamp over what he saw as an insufficient action against Israel, Dutch Prime Minister Geert Wilders declared that the parliament had passed his resolution stating, quote, "The Islamic terrorist organization Hamas must be completely destroyed." And in case you're unaware, there was a foreign minister who had stepped down because the Dutch parliament had not done anything about Israel's aggressions. And after that foreign minister stepped down, it did absolutely nothing, and the entire parliament ended up siding with Israel regardless. And then Berlin will acquire 90 Lightning 5 targeting pods for its Eurofighter Typhoon jets in a deal with Rafael, an Israeli defense firm. This comes even as Chancellor Friedrich Merz announced a freeze on arms exports that could be used in Gaza, with Germany's parliament nonetheless approving the purchase regardless. So even though Friedrich Merz is currently anti-Israel, the rest of Germany's parliament does not seem to be. And then once this invasion has fully resolved itself, there's going to be, even during the invasion of Israeli forces into Gaza City, now I'm assuming, there's a lot of civilian movements around the Gaza Strip, and Egypt is currently preparing to stop any of that foot traffic going into Egypt. And we have some of this here. So Egyptian president said Cairo opposes Israel's reoccupation of Gaza. Egypt's foreign minister told CNN that any mass immigration from Gaza is unacceptable and declared that Cairo will never permit it. Israel Hayom, which is an Israeli outlet, said, quote, "The Egyptian army is reinforcing its forces on the border with Gaza due to concerns about Gaza City residents fleeing towards the southern part of the Strip and from there to Rafah. The Egyptian army is reportedly reinforcing its forces along the border with Gaza ahead of Israel's expected operation to take place over Gaza City. According to Al-Arab Al-Jahid, Egypt fears that Israeli operation will push some 1 million Gazan civilians toward the Egyptian border, seeing such a scenario as a direct threat to its national security." And I had something for you here, but I'm not sure what it is. Let's see. Oh, this is the Egyptian army moving equipment to the border. Videos a little bit longer, but you get the point. I gotta switch off my media window. There we go. Still in focus too. Arab media outlets reported Egypt's deployment of 40,000 troops to the Gaza border. Egypt. Oh, and this was kind of crazy to me. Egypt is reportedly training 10,000 Palestinian forces at its military academies to secure post-war Gaza, drawing exclusively from West Bank, PLA, Fatah ranks, Hamas's main rivals. So once Gaza, they're doing a few things here. Firstly, they're cooperating with rivals of Hamas from the PLA to sort of, even though the Israeli government hates the PLA, they're sort of, let's just say, playing ball with Israel by not discussing this with Hamas. And they're going to, it looks like, try to potentially, and again, this may be totally to just keep peace, keep any conflict from rising up and potentially endangering Egypt. But they could also be looking to gain a sliver of Gaza for themselves. It is entirely possible, or at least establish themselves amongst the people who will potentially be in power once Hamas is overthrown. And then now that that's all said and done, I have a few things at the end here just to kind of wrap it up. We're going to talk about what the White House has discussed in terms of their plans and things of that nature. An IDF Arabic spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Avichya Adre urged Gaza City residents to evacuate south ahead of Operation Gideon Chariots 2. The evacuation of Gaza City is inevitable. Adre added, contrary to false rumors, there are wide open areas in the south, including the central maps and al-Mawasi. The IDF is surveying these zones. Families who move south will receive shelter, aid, and direct water lines. In Gaza City, Hamas-affiliated media are urging residents to ignore Israeli evacuation orders, airing videos repeatedly across multiple accounts. And they're, Hamas is using that to their advantage. There's no doubt about it. I can understand the argument that Gaza is so compact that any Israeli airstrike that's large enough that is trying to target Hamas is inevitably going to also hit civilians at the same time. But Hamas undoubtedly likes using the civilian deaths as propaganda to sway opinion against the Israeli government, and that is why Hamas, as you read there, and Hamas-affiliated media are urging residents to ignore Israeli evacuation orders. And it's also, it's part of their last stand at this point. Patriarchs Pizzaballa and Theophilus of Jerusalem said clergy and nuns need to remain in Gaza to protect civilians, calling departure a death sentence. They are telling Christians to become human shields for Hamas. Now, I did not state that last part, that they're telling them to become human shields. That was part of the news source that I pulled that from. But I really hope that that's not the case. If clergy members, Palestinian clergy members, start getting mowed down, I don't know how anybody can support that, even if all they're going to be trying to do are to protect civilians. And I just really hope it doesn't come to that. U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff said Trump will hold a major White House meeting tomorrow on Gaza to discuss an American plan for humanitarian aid and for the day after. Tony Blair and Jared Kushner are set to join a White House meeting on Gaza this Wednesday, where they will present President Trump with proposals for a post-war plan. Israel intends to break up Palestinian Authority, extend sovereignty across Judea and Samaria, and pursue an Emirates-style framework for Palestinian cities. Trump on Gaza said, quote, I think in the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to have a pretty good conclusive ending. But you can't forget about October 7th. Israel's Foreign Ministry Director General revealed multiple falsifications in last week's IPC report. Oh, sorry, that was regarding the famine. There was a report about the famine not being true, and I came to the conclusion that was definitely the case. I didn't mean to add that last part in there, but that wraps it up. So whatever the final plan is for the Palestinians, whatever the final Israel and United States plan is for the Palestinians, will be decided at that meeting. And Tony Blair will be there on behalf of the EU, on behalf of the UK rather. And Jared Kushner will presumably be there effectively on behalf of Israel. Jared Kushner is Jewish himself. Jared Kushner is the husband to Ivanka, and they are very well connected with the Israeli government. And that basically wraps it up, guys. We won't have much more on that until tomorrow, I think. That might be when that meeting is. Tomorrow. So we won't know exactly what's going to happen to the Palestinians. Until then, where they're going to go, what country is going to take them in, will any country take them in? We've already seen Egypt building up border security, so it's definitely not going to be them. So what the hell is going to happen to all these people? It's still up in the air. So I think later this week, Friday, I guess, we'll be doing, I think we're going to do a show on Middle Eastern proxy states, and by that, I mean proxy states of larger regional powers, so Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon. We're going to dive into everything that's going on there. And then hopefully Sunday, I think I'm going to go into U.S. politics for a change. There's just been so much shit happening in the Middle East lately that I can't get off of it as a topic. But we'll touch up on the U.S. economy. There's a lot of bad indicators that have been popping up there. And then we'll also dive into the Ukraine war again, kind of recap where we left off last time, and then touch up because there really hasn't been a lot there in terms of developments between the United States and Russia. It's been just a lot of disagreements one after another. So we'll kind of talk about what that means and so on and so forth. But yeah, if you like this, please tune in later in the week. Please like the show, subscribe, comment, whatever you can do to help spread it would be absolutely fantastic. And that's all I got for you today, guys. So thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time.